Look across the Attack on Titan fandom, and you'll find a loud, incredibly confident faction of viewers who will happily tell you that Annie Leonhart is a cold, unfeeling sociopath. They point to her dead eyes, and all the bodies left in her wake. And they conclude, yep, that girl is missing a soul. But if you actually pay attention to the text, and I mean really look past the terrifying Titan exterior, you realize that Annie isn't a sociopath at all. In fact, she might be the most human, emotionally compromised character in the entire series. Her tragedy isn't that she lacks feelings, it's that she has too many of them. And she spent her entire life developing a psychological fortress to keep them from destroying her. Today, we are going to look at every single reason why Annie Leonhart is the most human character in AOT, along with the one person that was able to break through her psychological fortress, a small, scrawny blonde boy named Armin Arlert. I just rewatched AOT with my brother, and this time, I analyzed every second of screen time Annie Leonhart had. And no, it's not just because she's so sexy. Okay, it was because of her nose, okay, whatever. You see, Annie's entire Season 1 campaign didn't fail because of the Scout's brilliant strategies or Aaron's rage. It failed because she was hopelessly, fatally compromised by her attachment to Armin. It's a connection that literally controls her actions from the shadows of the first season. We don't see it, but we see implications of it, and this is the most important point that I will be returning to. And because of her initial interest for Armin, it effectively sabotaged the entire Marleyan warrior mission. But to understand why a ruthless, hyper-trained military asset would let some weak-willed intellectual ruin her life's goals, we first have to unpack the myth of her sociopathy, and the delusion of the boys she was forced to work with. Let's travel back in time for a second, all the way back to Marley, when Bertolt, Reina, and Annie were still being trained to be warrior candidates. We're here to address several strong pieces of evidence, and to analyze what they all mean. In one potent scene, Bertolt and Reina are discussing amongst themselves something important. However, when asked to give her opinion, Annie replies,
Dunno, I was distracted.
We cut to the destroyed remains of a grasshopper. Yes, Annie ruthlessly steps on a bug in quite the same way that she ruthlessly steps on Levi Squad. People see this and think, classic serial killer behavior. However, I don't think that the scene here was trying to show that she was a sociopath. She isn't getting some sadistic pleasure from it, nor is she intrigued by death the same way as Gross did. To understand why she crushed this bug, we have to go back a little further. She was actually raised as a weapon by an abusive adopted father who initially only valued her as a ticket to an honorary Marleyan retirement, and trained her in much the same way I trained my little brother, by throwing him around a bunch. Good times. To be fair, I watched a lot of anime, so I legit thought I was making him strong. And that if I threw him onto the ground enough times, he would grow up to be stronger than Goku or something. Anyway, Annie learned early on that life in this world is cheap, easily crushed, and ultimately meaningless. That's what her father had trained into her from years of beating her, all in attempts to get her to be strong. Crushing this bug was a mirror of her worldview, to show us insight into what makes Annie tick. You see, if the world was so cruel, why bother caring about anything? But a true sociopath feels no remorse. They don't feel anything. Annie was just forced to stifle her feelings. She's practically suffocating under the weight of her own guilt. And at this point in her younger years, it's just a desperate survival mechanism to cope with the horrific things she's gonna do. All to get back to her father after his last-minute regretful apology trapped her in a toxic cycle of obligation. Contrast her with Reina, who literally had to fracture his entire personality into two separate entities just to survive his own cognitive dissonance. However, Annie repressed herself, her emotions, all because she didn't want to have to feel every single ounce of horror she inflicts, which makes her tough exterior less of her personality and who she was forcing herself to be in this hostage situation that was forced upon her. And so, with this setup, she was forced into this by Marley. She was forced into this by her father. And now, she feels as if she has an obligation to commit atrocities that she never asked for. Jumping ahead for a moment now, nowhere is this situation clearer than the aftermath of the Battle of Trost.
I'm sorry,
Contrition does them no good. What they need is a proper burial.
That corpse belonged to Marco Bott. And why was Marco dead? Because Reina and Bertolt physically pinned him down and psychologically pinned Annie down and forced her to strip Marco of his ODM gear, leaving him to be eaten alive. This moment had a profound impact on all three of them, forcing Bertolt to reconcile with himself and causing Reina to have his split personality, which is why he appears completely shocked at seeing the corpse, but why Annie breaks down in tears. Again, being forced into a situation she didn't want any part of, which, in a deeply dark, twisted way, makes it hilarious that Reina spent years thinking Annie actually liked him, and that they were all one big happy warrior family. Annie absolutely despised him and Bertolt. And if we go back to right before they broke down the walls, after Marcel gets eaten by Amir, Annie literally kicks Reina's teeth into the dirt. However, she had no reason to think of them as friends. You see, in that very same scene, Annie suggested going back immediately. She did not care what would happen to Reina, or even Bertolt. She desperately wanted out of the situation. Reina was the one who forced them both to go. However, don't get me wrong, I'm not blaming him. He was in the same abusive cycle that Marley had put over them. However, since this is a deep dive on Annie, I'll be focusing on her, and her point of view on all of this. I just had to get that out of the way because, well, Reina chokes out my girl instantly afterward. Yeah. And then once they break through the wall, they literally drag her inside unconscious. So like, she's the most unwilling participant in this, okay? They also force her to go on missions for them, secret ones, down to underneath the city and such, where she even meets flipping Kenny. Yeah, that scene was pure fan service. It was awesome. However, with all that in mind, let's talk about Bertolt for a second. The guy had a massive crush on Annie, yet Reina basically gaslit himself and Bertolt into believing Annie ever felt anything but pure hatred for them both. Annie's deep hatred for her comrades stemmed from the fact that, unlike them, she actually developed a profound sense of empathy for the people inside the walls. She saw them as human beings, not devils. In fact, if you look closely at the lore, again, Annie actively refused to take part in the physical destructions of the walls at any time, not just the first one while she was unconscious. Annie drew a line. She would kill when forced to, but she refused to participate in the mindless slaughter of humanity. Because again, she was an unwilling participant and never even wanted to be there. And you see, right after the scene she talks to Kenny, we get the scene where they're all talking and planning together. However, the entire scene, Annie is extremely irritated. She tells Reina to get out of her face because she's gonna throw up at the sight of him. Reina makes a comment about how she shouldn't be feeling empathy for them again, or something along those lines.
I'm gonna puke. Could you please move your face away from mine?
Now, this implies that Annie had already brought up multiple times, or at least subtly hinted, that she really didn't want to kill these people. Of course, Reina breaks his mind over it, but Annie was viscerally disgusted by their actions. Now, this part's gonna come out feeling like an Annie-Armin ship, which it totally is. However, let's examine this and recontextualize Season 1. So, why Armin? Out of everyone in the 104th, why did Annie grow so profoundly, destructively attached to him? Well, other than being the first person she looks at when she wakes up. During their time training, Armin was a realist who openly admitted his own weakness and questioned the morality of their world. Even though he has idyllic ideological viewpoints, he understands morality better than most people. Armin never saw Annie as a scary, unapproachable person. He saw her and validated her. You see, he didn't prejudge her. And most famously, he noted that he didn't believe in good people or bad people, just people who were useful to individual causes. You see, at this point, she was a girl who viewed herself as an irredeemable monster. She was actively working to kill all these people. And Armin's profound empathy was intoxicating. He was the only person who offered her understanding, without demanding that she was a hero in return. And that's all she really ever wanted. And so he accidentally became her moral compass. And this is actually the chink in her armor. It broke what made her so effective and ruthless. This attachment completely recontextualizes her entire Season 1 campaign. Think about the iconic, terrifying moment the female Titan corners Armin in the plains. Now, the show states that she lifted his hood to check to see if he was Eren, and left him because he wasn't. But look at her face in that frame. That isn't the face of a hunter disappointed by the wrong prey. That is a look of sheer, overwhelming relief that she didn't accidentally stomp him to death. She didn't check him for Eren. She checked him exclusively to ensure Armin's survival. Then she leaves him stranded instead of crushing him, despite knowing dang well that Armin is a literal tactical genius who poses the single greatest threat to her mission. And this ties directly into this. Armin was actively enabling her too. Armin had every single chance to turn Annie in the exact moment he realized she had stolen Marco's gear to cover up her own during the military inspection. He knew it was Marco's. He knew Marco was dead under highly suspicious circumstances, and what did he do? Absolutely nothing. He sat on that key piece of information because he already liked Annie. If you need proof of Armin's subconscious thirst, look no further than Season 2. When Armin is describing Krista, talking about how cute she is, he specifically lists off her physical traits. Blonde hair, blue eyes. Guess who else perfectly fits that description? Annie Leonhart. Let's be real, Hitch isn't the only thirsty one in this show. Armin was down bad day one. Later, Annie spares him again during the expedition because, in her own words,
You know, Armin, It's nice that I could be a good person for you.
She wanted him to see her as a good person. This craving for validation from Armin completely blinds her. And despite being baited into this trap, Annie went along with it, and she did this despite knowing it was a trap. Because it was Armin. However, at the end of season 1, she encases herself in an unbreakable crystal. The crystal is often viewed as a tactical retreat, but emotionally, it was a physical manifestation of what she'd already been doing, repressing herself. She was trapped between her toxic promise to her father and her agonizing guilt over betraying the people inside the walls, especially Armin, and killing Levi's squad. She wasn't only in tears because of not being able to capture Eren, she was in tears because she couldn't choose between her promise to her father and ruthlessly betraying her friends, especially Armin. Fast forward to season 4, the rumbling begins, and it forces Annie back into the world. And here, her arc reaches a beautiful, tragic climax. For years, her only motivations were pure, selfish survival, getting back to Marley to see her dad. But when she finally reunites with Armin, she joins the Scouts. However, that's not where her story truly ends. This brings us to the long-awaited boat scene on the ship to Odiha, which acts as the emotional climax of Annie and Armin's connection. Sitting on deck, Annie openly admits that she's tired of fighting. She officially steps away from the final battle, choosing to stay behind with the Azumabito group because she cannot stomach killing Eren, nor can she handle any more bloodshed. And predictably, a loud portion of the fandom lost their minds. The internet was flooded with angry rants calling her a coward, a quitter, and a selfish monster who got off scot-free, saying that Rhina was a better person than her because of it. But these critics completely missed the narrative point. Annie was always an unwilling participant. Unlike Eren, who actively sought out his destiny, or the Scouts, who found meaning in suicide charges, Annie was a child soldier, drafted into a fascist government before she even knew who she was. Her literally coming out of her crystal shell to Armin, the only character she feels emotionally safe with, and admitting she's exhausted isn't a betrayal of her character. It's the most realistic reaction to trauma in the entire show. She spent years being forced to mutilate people for a country that viewed her as subhuman, forced to try and reconcile that she was going to murder all the people she was spending years with. Years. And now, she just doesn't want to kill Eren. She's a broken person who has absolutely nothing left in the tank. Armin, who spent 4 years pouring out his heart to her while she was frozen in crystal, is the only one who truly understands her weariness. When he holds her hand on that ship, he wasn't just validating her. He was accepting her exactly as she is, flawed, tired, and human. In the end, Annie Leonhart's story is a brilliant subversion of standard anime villain tropes. She wasn't born evil, and she wasn't a sociopath who enjoyed the cruelty of the world. She was a deeply broken child, weaponized by a fascist empire, who tried to protect her sanity by pretending she didn't care about anyone or anything. But human connection is a stubborn thing, and her accidental love for a brilliant, fragile boy completely derailed her ability to be a monster. By allowing herself to be compromised by Armin, Annie proved that her humanity couldn't be trained out of her. She failed her mission, but she saved her soul. She isn't a hero, and she never wanted to be. But she's easily one of the most beautifully written, fiercely human characters in AOT.